This is my dad. First question. What is your all-time best sports experience as a player and or as a fan?
Well, I've never experienced any of those as a player, so as a fan, it would be a Monday night football game that I was at in Buffalo, New York, probably in the late 80s or mid 80s. The Jets won over the Buffalo Bills 34-10. What made it really special is I probably had 10 friends from my neighborhood back in the Clifton Park Half Moon area come out and visit me at college and go to the game with me, and it was just a wonderful weekend that started on Friday and ended with a big win on Monday night.
Okay. Wonderful. How is participation in sports different today than it was for you growing up?
Well, it was definitely a game when I was growing up. It's much more serious now. When we played baseball, which I did, you played baseball for 6 weeks in the beginning of May, and that was it until the following year. Like I said, it's much more serious. There are club sports in the off season. There's batting cages. There's things like Hayner's Sports Barn where you can develop your skills year round. It's just taken much more seriously, and I'm really kind of talking now at the high school level. In some schools, it's actually become somewhat militant. For example, that the coach won't let you play on the lacrosse team, for example, unless you've played lacrosse in the winter, spring, summer, and fall. That's the only way that you'll make the varsity team. It's unfortunate. It's less of a game.
You can go to any single sporting event, past, present, or future, in the world once. Where do you go, and what three people go with you, and why?
This is an easy one. The 1969 New York Jets victory over the Baltimore Colts. Super Bowl III. They won it. Joe Namath professed that they would. And I would take my two sons, James Morgan, Matthew, and my Uncle Bill, who was a huge Jet fan. And I guess why this event, it's probably because they'll never win another one.
Yeah, you're probably right. What changes have you noticed in professional athletes over time?
Oh, it's fairly significant. It's they are faster, they are stronger, they are bigger. From a football perspective, you have 240-pound athletes running 40-yard dashes that in the past you would only see track and field folks run. So the athletic strength and speed of these individuals is just incredible. That just reflects the fact that they've turned this into being a full-time job, and it's the focus that they are putting towards it to make themselves great. And in addition to that, I think if you flip on the TV, the professional sports have essentially been the majority of the successful athletes have been minorities in the baseball, football, and basketball reigns.
What is the most memorable game you ever saw, and what do you remember about it?
I have been to a handful of professional and semi-professional games of all sports, but and there's been a lot of good plays. But the best memory for me comes down to a lower level of Little League. I managed a Little League team here in Burnt Hills for 11 years, and the last year that your older brother, my son, James Morgan, was playing, last game of the season, and he was not a strong player from a hitting standpoint, but in the last game of the season, and he hit a good line drive that got through both outfielders and rolled out to the fence. And I was the third base coach, so I'm the one that's holding people up or tell them to keep on coming. And we had lost this game anyway. We were, it was in the later innings, and it wasn't going to, change the outcome. but the ball was getting thrown into the infield. He's rounding second onto the way to third, and regardless of whether he was going to be out at home or not, I was going to give him an opportunity for a home run, and waved him in. He didn't. He had no idea that the ball was so close, and there should have been a 95% chance that he was thrown out at the plate. But the ball was mishandled, as it is most of the time at the Little League level. And it just it didn't get to the catcher in the time that it needed. And your brother James Morgan slid into home for an inside the park home run, his one and only before he retired from the game.
Beautiful. What are three of the most memorable sports rivalries of your lifetime, and what makes them great?
Well, I think some of these still actually exist. It'll always be the Giants and the Cowboys relative to football. And I think the reason being is they're in this, excuse me, they're in the same conference, and they've always been two great teams that have had their fair share of Super Bowls. So it's just always been very, very competitive. Moving over to baseball, the Mets and the Yankees. Most people think, well, it's Yankees and Red Sox, but the Yankees and Mets, they share the same city. They play across the river. They call it the Subway Series. They get a chance to play every year, and it's really nothing more than bragging rights type of thing. And I guess lastly, you don't see it now, but I grew up when the Soviet Union existed, the Cold War, and when it came to the Olympics, whether it be summer or winter, U.S. versus Soviet Union, that medal count was ridiculously paid attention to, and it was quite celebrated if we were able to beat the Soviet Union in the games, because they had so many countries and they had such a large number of countries now, but areas of the Soviet Union that they could pull from. But definitely the U.S. and Soviet Union.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Beautiful.
Can I see that?
Yeah.
I know I say
If you could go back in time, what sports would you play that you never did?
I think I would try hockey out. I was really good at ice skating when I was younger, but I just never got to actually try playing organized hockey. But that's a sport that's really cool, and that I enjoy playing for fun. I think would have been fun to play like on an actual team.
Right. How do sports impact your life today?
Well, soccer is probably my favorite sport, and watching all those games on TV and then actually going to Europe to see a game, really was kind of a gateway to my passion and interest for European culture, which kind of just got me interested in European history and just history in general. So it's just had a really big impact on me. It's just interested me in other cultures.
All right. Beautiful. You can go to any single sporting event, past, present, or future in the world once. Where do you go, and what three people go with you, and why?
I think I'll go to the World Cup final. I would definitely have to bring my dad with me.
What year?
This year, 2018 World Cup final. I think that would be amazing to go see that live. I'd bring my dad with me. I'd bring my cousin Aaron with me, and I'd bring my friend Jackson with me.
What changes have you noticed in athletes over time?
I think athletes today are just much more fit than athletes in the past. I mean, you looked at football players in the past, and it wasn't uncommon to see these big flabby linemen, but now everyone's just super toned and fit.
What is the most memorable game you ever saw, and what do you remember about it?
I went to Fenway Park, and I had seats in a loge box right behind first base. And, the atmosphere was fantastic, and David Ortiz hit a walk-off home run to win the game. So, that was the best game I've ever seen.
Adam Solari's going to like that one. What are that's the last question. What are the three of the most memorable sports rivalries in your lifetime, and what makes them so great?
Yankees and the Red Sox. When I was younger, I used to love the Red Sox. I had friends that loved the Yankees, and it was always really fun to watch those games. I was also a huge Syracuse basketball fan, so when they were in the Big East and Georgetown was in the Big East, that was always an entertaining rivalry, Georgetown versus Syracuse. And I love El Clasico, Real Madrid versus Barcelona. Those games are always super, super entertaining. Some great goals scored.
Put her there. So, this is my brother James, and here we go. How is participation in sports different today than it was for you growing up?
I wouldn't say participation in sports has changed all that much since the time that I was growing up. I would say increased importance on being a well-rounded athlete has changed. When I was an athlete in high school, student athletes were encouraged to find a sport and kind of stick with it. I feel like athletes today are pushed to try off-season sports more often than when I was growing up. And they're also advised to be better student athletes with more importance being placed on academics in relation to their sport.
Beautiful. All right. If you could go to any single sporting event, past, present, or future, in the world once, where do you go? What 3 people go with you, and why?
So if I could go to any sporting event in the past or present, I would go to the Miracle on Ice in the 1980 Lake Placid Olympics. I bring my brother, my dad, and my friend Jake, who's a big hockey guy. I'd go because it's arguably the best hockey game ever played on American ice, and it was just cool how it was a bunch of college kids that beat the Russians in the one game that they're the best at.
All right. Good. What changes have you noticed in athletes over time?
So changes I've noticed in athletes over time, the biggest thing has got to be the media presence for athletes today. Because of the increased media coverage of athletes, they're encouraged to be much bigger role models than they had in the past, and they're leaders for social change worldwide, and they're asked, because of the media presence, they're asked to address a lot more variety of social and political issues.
I agree. What is the most memorable game you ever saw, and what do you remember about it?
Most memorable game I ever saw. It's got to be Monday night Jets Steelers game at the Meadowlands. It was in the middle of December, and I was in middle school when I went to see it. It was back when the Jets were competitive in the AFC and actually could win games. The forecast called for close to like a foot of snow, and it was snowing heavily the entire game. It was the most memorable because I got to miss school that day and drive down to New York City with my dad, and because they had to bring trucks in between like TV timeouts to plow the field, and because the Jets led a fourth quarter comeback victory with like 2 minutes left. So
yeah, Jets fans. What are 3 of the most memorable sports rivalries of your lifetime, and what makes them great?
So 3 memorable sports rivalries. The first one's got to be Yankees-Red Sox. It's just 2 of the best teams in baseball, rival cities. They always meet in like the ALCS when they're both competitive, and they just seem to hate each other. They've had like fights break out and guys charge them out and stuff like that. So that's definitely got to be one. Another one's got to be Jets-Patriots. Kind of like the Red Sox Yankees, they're rival cities. They don't like each other. They hate each other because of scandals like Spygate and the whole Bill Belichick decision. And no matter how bad the Jets are, the games between those 2 teams always seem to be super competitive. So.
And last question:
I said 3, right?
Oh, you said.
I said Jets, Pats, Yankees, Red Sox. Last one's got to be Penguins, Flyers for NHL. It's 2 Pennsylvania teams, and they have the most penalty minutes for two opposing teams playing each other for their games, which is pretty cool. So.
Last question: what is your all-time best sports experience as a player and or a fan?
Best sports experience. It's got to be Jets beating the Patriots in the 2010 AFC division playoffs to make it to the AFC Championship game. That game was just incredible. Mark Sanchez was just on fire, and kicking the Pats out of the playoffs is kind of the best feeling ever as a Jets fan. So
Yeah, we had the Carafondas over too.
yeah, great game.
All right, so I've ended all these with a handshake. So yes. All right, thank you.
Good, bud.
See ya.